Dante Williams had been dreaming of this moment ever since his family moved to the new town over the summer. He'd spent hours kicking a soccer ball against the wall in his room, practicing his passes in the backyard, and timing himself doing sprints up and down his street. Now that he was finally here, lacing up his cleats on the sidelines of the local community soccer field, he could feel a mix of excitement and nerves buzzing through him. Dante had always loved soccer. It was where he felt the most confident, the most himself. Back in his old neighborhood, he was known for his speed and his skill on the field. Moving to a new town, however, meant starting fresh, proving himself all over again, and hoping he'd fit in with his new teammates. As he adjusted his cleats and checked his shin guards, he watched the other boys warming up on the field, some of them laughing and calling out to each other, already bonded by years of playing together. Just as Dante was about to join the others, a boy with sandy blonde hair and a broad, friendly grin jogged over. He looked around Dante's age, about 12, and had a soccer ball tucked under his arm. "Hey, I'm Liam," he said, reaching out a hand. "Are you new to the team?" "Yeah, I'm Dante," he replied, shaking Liam's hand and smiling back, relieved to meet someone who seemed friendly. "Just moved here last month. I used to play forward on my old team." "Forward? Awesome," Liam said enthusiastically. "We need someone like you. Our team's been pretty solid, but honestly, we lost a lot of games last season. We could use some speed up front." Dante chuckled. "Well, I'm pretty fast. I can't wait to get out there and see what we can do." Liam's energy was contagious, and as they started passing the ball back and forth, Dante felt his nerves slipping away. Liam was quick on his feet, and they immediately fell into a rhythm, calling out plays and encouraging each other as if they'd been teammates for years. Dante could already tell that Liam was passionate about soccer. He had the same drive and competitive edge that Dante loved. They spent the warm-up laughing, exchanging tips, and strategizing about how they could surprise the other team's defense. The other players, noticing Dante and Liam's skills and easy camaraderie, started joining in, passing the ball to Dante and welcoming him to the team. Coach Morales, the team head coach, blew his whistle and called the boys over for a quick pre-game talk. He introduced Dante to the team officially and shared a few words about how their teamwork would make the difference this season. "Dante, welcome to the team," Coach Morales said with a nod, clapping him on the shoulder. "We're excited to have you. Let's see what you got." Dante felt a surge of pride and nodded enthusiastically. The boys cheered, and Liam gave him an excited thumbs up. Everything was going well. He felt like he was truly becoming part of something special. As the practice session continued, the team split into groups to run drills, with Coach Morales overseeing one group and the assistant coach, Mr. Braddock, taking the other. Mr. Braddock was Liam's father, a tall, stern-looking man who seemed to take the game very seriously. He wore a cap pulled low over his eyes, and his gaze seemed to linger on Dante in a way that made Dante feel a little uncomfortable. As they ran passing drills, Dante noticed that every time he made a play, Mr. Braddock's eyes narrowed, watching him with a silent intensity that felt almost like disapproval. Still, Dante brushed it off, focusing on his game and the camaraderie he felt with his teammates. After practice, as the boys gathered their gear, Liam invited Dante to join him at the local park on Saturday for an extra practice session. "We can work on some moves," Liam said, smiling. "I've got a few tricks I think you'll like." Dante grinned, thrilled at the invitation. "Sounds great. Let's do it." The next Saturday, Dante arrived at the park early, wearing his favorite team jersey and ready to play. He spotted Liam by the goalposts, juggling a soccer ball. Liam waved him over, and they spent the next hour practicing shots, trying different passing combinations, and creating makeshift plays. They laughed and pushed each other to improve. For Dante, it was the most fun he'd had since moving to town. As they took a water break, sitting in the grass and catching their breath, Liam turned to Dante. "You're a natural, man. It feels like we've been playing together for years." Dante beamed. "Same dude. You're awesome. I'm really glad I joined this team." But just then, Dante noticed a figure walking toward them from across the field, and his heart sank. It was Mr. Braddock, and he looked anything but pleased. As he approached, he barely glanced at Dante, his eyes cold and focused only on Liam. "Liam," he said sharply, "we're going home now." Liam looked confused but nodded, standing up quickly. "Oh, okay, Dad. This is Dante. He's the new kid on the team. Remember?" Liam said, but Mr. Braddock barely acknowledged Dante, giving him a hard, dismissive look before turning back to Liam. "I told you before, you don't need to waste your time with everyone on the team," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Focus on real teammates, the ones who fit in." Dante felt a hot surge of embarrassment and anger. His stomach churned as he processed Mr. Braddock's words. He'd never experienced someone being so openly dismissive, and though he tried to keep his face neutral, it was hard not to feel hurt. Liam looked back and forth between his dad and Dante, clearly uncomfortable. "But, Dad, Dante's really good, and we're just practicing," Liam started, but Mr. Braddock cut him off. "No arguments, Liam," he said firmly. He shot one last look at Dante, muttering, "This isn't the right place for everyone." Dante clenched his jaw, holding back the retort bubbling inside him. He wanted to stand up for himself, to say something that would stop Mr. Braddock from looking at him like he was less than the other players, but something in his gut told him to let it go, to stay calm. So he swallowed his pride and nodded at Liam. "It's cool," he said, keeping his voice steady. "See you at practice." Liam gave him an apologetic look, mouthing sorry, as he was led away by his father. Dante watched them go, feeling a wave of disappointment and frustration wash over him. He'd finally felt like he belonged here, and now, because of Liam's father, he was beginning to wonder if that was possible. It stung to be treated like an outsider when all he wanted was to play soccer, to make friends, and to fit in. That night, as Dante lay in bed, he replayed the moment over and over in his mind. Part of him wished he'd spoken up, that he'd told Mr. Braddock he had just as much right to be there as anyone else. But another part of him felt conflicted, wondering if maybe it was easier to just stay quiet, to avoid causing trouble for himself or his family. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about Liam. He knew his friend hadn't meant any harm, and he hoped that their friendship could survive whatever animosity Mr. Braddock seemed to harbor. But he also knew that things had changed. The challenge ahead wasn't just about proving himself on the soccer field. It was about proving that he deserved to be treated with respect, no matter what anyone else thought. Dante resolved to show up to practice with his head held high, determined to play his best and prove his worth, not just to the team but to himself. The next week at practice, Dante tried to focus on the drills and keep his mind off the tension that had started brewing. He had hoped that Mr. Braddock's comments were a one-time thing, just a bad moment from an overprotective parent. But as the season continued, Dante noticed a pattern. Every time he performed well in practice, showing his speed and skill on the field, he could feel Mr. Braddock's eyes on him, watching with a look that seemed to hold more irritation than encouragement. First, Dante brushed it off. He reminded himself that he wasn't playing to impress anyone. He was here because he loved the game. But it became harder to ignore when Mr. Braddock's treatment shifted from looks to actions. One afternoon, Coach Morales gathered the team before a practice scrimmage and started announcing the starting lineup for the upcoming game. Dante had been a starter in previous games, often scoring or assisting on key plays. He waited confidently, expecting to hear his name called for forward, his usual position. But Coach Morales looked at the clipboard and paused, as if debating something. "Dante, you'll be sitting out the first half," he finally announced. Dante's face fell, but he tried to hide his disappointment. He noticed Mr. Braddock standing off to the side, watching with a smirk. "Why am I benched?" Dante wondered, trying to keep his composure. He wanted to ask Coach Morales, but he didn't want to come off as entitled. Instead, he waited until the break to approach him. "Coach, I just wanted to ask, is there something I need to work on to get back in the starting lineup?" Dante asked politely, hoping for constructive feedback. Coach Morales looked down, almost uncomfortable, as he glanced quickly at Mr. Braddock, who was busy directing another group of players. "You're doing fine, Dante, but we have a lot of talent on this team," Coach Morales said. his voice quieter. Sometimes it's about fitting the right pieces together. Dante nodded, trying to hide his frustration. Got it, coach. Thanks. But as the game continued, he couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Braddock's influence was starting to shape the team's decisions. He was trying not to let it get to him, but every time he saw Liam cast a glance at his father during a play or practice, it felt like a reminder of the tension that had started to grow between them. Dante knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to earn his place, no matter what anyone thought of him. As the weeks passed, Dante continued to prove himself, working harder than ever on his game. Even though his relationship with Liam was strained, he held out hope that one day, the team would see him for the player he was, not for who they thought he should be. And despite the challenges, Dante was prepared to fight for what he loved. He wasn't going to let anyone, not even Mr. Braddock, take that away from him. Dante was silent, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. It was clear that no matter how well he played, Mr. Braddock would always find a way to cut him down after practice. Liam, visibly upset, decided to confront his father directly. They hadn't even made it to the car when Liam spoke up. Dad, why are you so hard on Dante? He's one of our best players and you keep putting him down. It's not fair. Mr. Braddock stiffened, glancing around as if to make sure no one else was listening. Liam, you don't understand, he said, his tone dismissive. This team doesn't need players who think they're better than everyone else. We need team players, people who fit the culture here. What does that even mean? Liam asked, his voice sharp. Mr. Braddock sighed, his expression hardening. Some people don't belong in certain places, Liam. You'll understand one day. Liam's face turned red with frustration, and he couldn't hold back. That's not true, Dad. Dante is a better player than half the team, and he's my friend. Mr. Braddock frowned, a warning look in his eyes. Watch your tone, Liam. I'm your father. I know what's best for you and for this team. Liam bit his lip, his hands clenched at his sides, but he didn't argue further. He realized that nothing he could say would change his father's mind. Still, he felt determined to stand by Dante no matter the consequences. The rest of the season continued with similar tension. Dante's starting position was given to other players, and he was only put in during the second half of games. Even though he kept scoring and making valuable plays, he was never acknowledged by Mr. Braddock. Each time he noticed Coach Morales glancing uncertainly between him and Mr. Braddock, clearly torn, Dante began to feel the weight of his silence. Part of him wanted to speak up, to call out the unfairness and stand up for himself, but another part of him feared the fallout. He didn't want to be seen as a troublemaker, and he didn't want to jeopardize his place on the team. He stayed quiet, hoping that his skills on the field would speak for themselves. But as the team headed toward the championship game, Dante couldn't shake the feeling that his place and his friendship with Liam would be tested in a way that went far beyond soccer. This time, he wasn't sure if he could stay silent. The day of the championship game arrived, and Dante was ready. He'd been looking forward to this match for weeks, imagining himself out on the field, scoring goals with his team as they worked together for the win. But as the team gathered for warm-ups, Dante noticed a strange tension in the air. Some of the other boys gave him sympathetic glances, while Coach Morales looked over the lineup sheet, a deep crease forming on his forehead. Dante joined the lineup huddle, bracing himself for Coach's announcement. He wanted so badly to play, and he knew he was ready for it. He'd practiced, worked harder than anyone, and had proven his skills in every game they'd played. Coach Morales called out the names, assigning positions, and Dante held his breath, waiting to hear his own. But his name never came. Dante, you'll be on the bench, Coach Morales said finally, not quite meeting Dante's eyes. We'll bring you in later in the game. Dante's heart sank. He'd worked too hard to sit out this match, and he couldn't understand why he was being kept on the sidelines. It was the biggest game of the season, and the team needed him. He knew it, and so did everyone else. For a moment, he looked at Coach Morales, wanting to say something, to demand an explanation. But Coach's gaze flicked over to Mr. Braddock, who stood by with his arms crossed, looking pleased. Dante took a deep breath, forcing down his frustration. All right, Coach, he said, his voice tight. He didn't want to make a scene in front of the team, but the unfairness of it all weighed heavily on him. He could feel his face growing hot, but he kept his expression neutral, determined not to let his disappointment show. As the game started, Dante sat on the bench, his hands clenched at his sides. The first half was rough. Without Dante's speed and skill, the team struggled to keep up with the opposing players and quickly fell behind. Liam, who was out on the field, kept glancing over at Dante, his expression growing more frustrated with each missed pass and lost opportunity. He knew the team was stronger with Dante on the field, and watching his friend benched for no reason made his blood boil. Finally, during a break in play, Liam jogged over to the sidelines, pulling off his sweat-soaked jersey and approaching his father. "Dad, this is ridiculous," he said, his voice barely controlled. "We're losing and Dante's just sitting here. He's one of the best players we have." Mr. Braddock gave his son a warning glare. "Liam, get back on the field and focus on the game," he said sharply. "We don't need players who think they're better than the team." Liam's face turned red with frustration, and he couldn't hold back anymore. "Dad, this has nothing to do with the team. You're just punishing Dante because you don't want him here." His voice was loud enough that a few parents nearby looked over, curious about the commotion. Mr. Braddock's expression hardened, but before he could respond, Coach Morales stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Let's all calm down," he said, glancing nervously at Mr. Braddock. "We're just trying to make the best choices for the team." But Liam shook his head, turning his frustration on the coach. "The best choices for the team, coach? We're down by 2 goals. Dante is the reason we even made it to this game, and he's sitting on the bench while we lose." His voice was thick with emotion as he turned back to his father. "Why are you doing this? Just because he's different? That's messed up, Dad. And you know it." Dante, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "Liam, it's okay," he said softly, trying to keep the situation from escalating. But Liam wasn't backing down. He turned to the crowd of parents, who had started watching, his voice loud and clear. "Everyone here knows Dante is one of our best players," he said, looking around at the parents and teammates. "He deserves to be out there." A few parents murmured in agreement, and Coach Morales shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Mr. Braddock, whose face was flushed with anger. After a long, tense pause, Coach Morales finally cleared his throat. "All right, Dante," he said, his voice firm. "Get out there and show them what you can do." Dante felt a rush of relief and gratitude as he stood up, nodding at Coach Morales. "Thank you, Coach," he said, and with a quick look of thanks to Liam, he jogged onto the field, his heart pounding with determination. As soon as Dante joined the game, the energy on the field shifted. His speed and precision brought the team back to life, and they began closing the gap, scoring 1 goal after another. Dante coordinated with Liam, calling out plays and moving the ball down the field with skill and confidence. The crowd was on their feet, cheering as the team pushed forward, rallying around Dante and fighting their way back into the game. In the final minutes, with the score tied, Dante sprinted down the field, dodging defenders and passing the ball to Liam, who made the winning goal just as the whistle blew. The team erupted in cheers, and Dante was lifted up by his teammates, their voices loud with celebration. He looked over at the sidelines and saw Mr. Braddock watching, his face unreadable. After the game, as the team gathered to celebrate their victory, Liam approached Dante, clapping him on the shoulder. "You were amazing out there, man," he said, grinning. "We couldn't have done it without you." "Thanks, Liam," Dante replied, a smile breaking across his face. "And thanks for standing up for me. I don't think I could have done it alone." Liam nodded, his face serious. "You shouldn't have to. You're my friend, and you deserve to be treated like everyone else." Their conversation was interrupted by Coach Morales, who walked over looking somewhat humbled. "Dante, you played a great game," he said, his voice warm with respect. "I apologize for not putting you in sooner. You've proven that you belong here." Dante accepted the coach's apology, feeling a sense of validation, But before he could respond, Mr. Bradrick approached, his expression guarded. He looked at Dante, then at his son, before speaking in a low, controlled voice. "Liam, get your things," he said, ignoring Dante entirely. "We're leaving." Liam hesitated, glancing between his father and Dante, but then he squared his shoulders. "Dad, I'm staying with my team," he said, his voice steady. "I'm done letting you tell me who I can and can't be friends with." Mr. Bradrick's face hardened, but he said nothing. He turned on his heel and walked away, his shoulders stiff with anger. Dante felt a mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, and a quiet pride that he and Liam had stood together, refusing to be divided by prejudice. As the team continued their celebration, Dante realized that this victory was about more than just a soccer game. It was about standing up for himself, proving his worth, and finding allies in unexpected places. After the game, the atmosphere in the locker room was electric. Laughter and cheers filled the air as Dante and his teammates celebrated their hard-fought victory. But amid the excitement, Dante could feel the tension still hanging from Mr. Bradrick's earlier outburst. He hoped that Liam's confrontation would help put an end to the discrimination he had faced, but there was still uncertainty lingering in the background. As the boys changed out of their uniforms, Coach Morales entered the room, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, team, gather round," he began, a proud smile on his face. "That was an incredible game today. You all fought hard, and I couldn't be prouder. But I also want to take a moment to address something important." The locker room quieted down as the boys turned their attention to the coach. Dante's heart raced, unsure of what to expect. Would Coach Morales address the tension with Mr. Bradrick? "I know there have been some issues this season regarding teamwork and respect among players," Coach Morales continued, his tone serious. "We're all here to support each other, and that includes standing up against any form of bias or discrimination. It's important that we treat one another with kindness and equality, regardless of our backgrounds." Dante felt a swell of hope. It was a step in the right direction. "I want to thank Dante for his incredible performance today," Coach Morales added, looking directly at him. "You showed us all what it means to be a team player, and I'm sorry I didn't put you in sooner. Your skills and dedication are what this team needs." A round of applause erupted in the locker room, and Dante's cheeks flushed with gratitude. He could see the approval on his teammates' faces, a clear signal that they were standing behind him. Just then, the door swung open and Liam entered, his face flushed with determination. He walked straight to Dante, a fire in his eyes. "I talked to my mom," Liam said, his voice filled with urgency. "She's really upset about what happened with my dad. She wants to talk to him to make him understand why what he said was wrong." Dante's heart sank a little, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. "Do you think he'll listen?" Dante asked, concern creeping into his voice. "I think he has to," Liam replied, his confidence unwavering. "It's not just about soccer. It's about who we are as people. I won't let him push you around or make you feel less than anyone else." As the boys packed their gear and started to leave the locker room, Dante felt a mix of apprehension and gratitude. With Liam standing by him, he felt bolstered, ready to confront whatever came next. In the days that followed, Dante tried to focus on soccer, but the atmosphere at practice shifted. Coach Morales continued to foster an environment of inclusion, addressing any comments that came up and encouraging the boys to speak out if they felt something was unfair. Dante appreciated the support but still felt the weight of Mr. Bradrick's words, especially during games when he would catch the coach's disapproving gaze. One afternoon, as practice was winding down, Liam called out to Dante. "Hey, do you want to come over after practice? My mom wants to make sure we're ready for the next game, and she has a few drills in mind." Dante smiled, relieved to be welcomed into Liam's home. "Sure, that sounds great." Later that evening, after practicing in Liam's backyard, they sat on the grass, exhausted but happy. Liam's mom brought out lemonade and cookies, and they all sat together, chatting about school and the upcoming game. Suddenly, the door swung open and Mr. Bradrick stepped outside, looking stern. "Liam, "We need to talk," he said, his tone cutting through the light-hearted atmosphere. Liam's expression hardened as he looked at Dante. "You can talk to me here, Dad," he replied, refusing to back down. "Now," Mr. Bradrick insisted, his gaze shifting to Dante. "This isn't the time or place." Dante felt a knot form in his stomach, recognizing the tension between the two. He glanced at Liam, who was standing his ground, his jaw set. "I'm not leaving him out of this," Liam said, his voice firm. "Dante is my friend, and you need to understand how wrong you are. Liam, this is about you not hanging around the wrong crowd," Mr. Bradrick snapped, his frustration palpable. "You need to be careful who you associate with." The words hung heavily in the air, and Dante felt his heart race. It was painful to hear, especially after everything they'd worked through together. "You're wrong, Dad," Liam replied, his voice rising. "It's not about the color of someone's skin. It's about being a good person and standing by your friends. Dante is a better player than anyone on this team, including me." Mr. Bradrick scoffed, shaking his head. "You think just because you're friends with him it makes it okay? It doesn't work that way." Liam stepped closer, determination radiating from him. "I don't care what you think. You're teaching me to hate people just because they're different, and that's not what I want to be. That's not the person I am." For a moment, Mr. Bradrick looked taken aback, caught off guard by his son's passion. But he quickly regained his composure, glaring down at Dante. "You should be grateful I'm trying to protect you, boy. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Dante stood up, refusing to let the fear take hold. "I know who I am, Mr. Bradrick. I know I'm a good player and a good friend. You don't get to decide who I am or where I belong. You're the one who needs to learn how to treat people with respect." Liam looked at Dante with a proud smile. He could see the strength in his friend, the determination that had been buried beneath the weight of prejudice. Mr. Bradrick's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Liam's mother stepped in. "All right, that's enough," she said, her voice firm and commanding. "This is not the time for threats or insults. We need to have a conversation about what's happening, and it needs to be constructive." Liam nodded, looking relieved that his mom was backing him up. "Exactly. This isn't just about soccer. It's about how people treat each other. And Dad, you need to hear that from us." Mr. Bradrick glared at both of them, clearly unhappy. But for the first time, he was met with resistance from his son, and it left him rattled. "I'll think about what you've said," he muttered after a long pause, his voice begrudgingly quiet. "But I'm not changing my views." "Maybe you should," Liam said, his voice steady. "And maybe you should start by looking at how you treat others. It matters." As Mr. Bradrick turned and walked back into the house, Dante felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. It wasn't just Liam standing up for him. It was Liam standing up for what was right, for justice, for their friendship. "Thanks for that," Dante said, looking at Liam with gratitude. "I didn't know what to expect." "Of course," Liam replied, a grin breaking across his face. "We're in this together, right? Friends stick up for each other." The conversation had sparked a new kind of energy between them, one fueled by the hope of creating change. They finished their lemonade, talking about strategies for the next game. But Dante felt a newfound sense of purpose. He knew that together they could challenge the status quo, not just for themselves, but for everyone in their community who deserved respect.